Hello and welcome to another episode of the Talent GTM podcast. I'm your host, Krissy Manzano, and today I have Ann Powell joining me. Super excited about that. She is the founder of Ignite Consulting, where she serves as a fractional RevOps and CRO partner, and she's helped scale companies from 25 million to over 5 billion in revenue. Very impressive. Founded RevOps Village, and she actually co-leads the Pavilion Women's Group. She advises several startups and lives and married with her husband and 2 kids. So, Anne, welcome to the podcast. Super excited to have you here today.
Thank you, Krissy. I'm glad to be back.
I know it's and we have, a great topic, right? About networking, right? And how it's not a shortcut, it's a strategy. And I think in this time, look, the market is heating up intensely with hiring, but then you have all these folks that are still looking for jobs, right? And so
Mhm.
it's creating a lot of this push and pull, but also that anxiety, especially for leaders, is still there. And I think a lot of people really, really misunderstand networking and how to make it a strategy, right? And so want to definitely get into that, but I'd love to start off with how has your network actually played a role in your own career by either landing a job or making a transition or even growing your business?
Yeah, I mean, there's numerous examples, and the one that I'd really like to talk about was from probably, gosh, it was earlier in my career. It was probably around 2009, 2010. I was working at Gilead Sciences. That's that $5 billion company. Well, now they're much larger, but they
Yeah.
were around that then, and I was one of many
Right.
people who helped contribute to that, not sole contributor. I started my career in FP&A, and I was on the commercial finance team supporting sales and marketing. I was also a very avid runner at the time. And so every Friday I would go out running, and true story, was all the guys, execs, and me. The senior financial analyst would go out running.
Yeah.
And I'd been in finance for about 5 years, and I went out running with DJ, who was one of the heads of commercial at the time. And he asked me, what are you thinking about your career? Like, what's next? You've been in the finance team here at Gilead for a couple of years. You've done well. I said, I've really realized I want to get closer to the business. And, finance is great. I enjoy it. I'm good at it. But I want to get more into the operations and really like how the business runs. And so that's like the step that I'm looking to take.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my God, Anne, we are going to be opening a role for a new HIV analytics and operations manager, which was a couple levels above mine. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, really? And he's like, you should 100% apply for it. You should apply and you should tell them that I told you to apply. And I said, okay. And in my head, what's interesting is I don't think I would have applied for it because it was 2
Right.
levels above where I was. And
Right.
I was like, okay, am I ready for this? But he saw that in me. And it was a very casual conversation, just, going out running. And so I applied, I got that job, and I ended up doing very well with it and was really like launched my career into operations and analytics. So, really core piece of like, was I there? Like, I'm going to go on a run with DJ and get a job. No, I was just, putting in the time, and it naturally revealed itself.
Yeah. You hear this a lot, but just community and you don't have to be. I think people think of networking as like, I've got to be super social, right? Which kind of
Mhm.
like leads into the next question. When did you start realize that networking isn't just about being social or knowing people, but about actually using your relationship strategically?
Yeah. I think there's a level of like real intention about how you do it. Right. And it's funny because I like to, I'm 44. I turn 45 in a couple months. And probably in my 30s, I would be a self-described extrovert. And people probably still think, and you're very extroverted, but I think I've become more of an introvert as I have aged.
Can
Um,
relate.
yeah, and had children.
Yes.
And when I think about intentional networking, you have to put in some sort of effort and you have to kind of spot those opportunities. So there was another moment from a different point in my career. This was when I was at Medallia. This was around, gosh, 2016, 2017. It was the first SaaS company I worked at.
Okay.
I had gotten a job as a director of sales operations and analytics. So again, staying in that ops and analytics that started from Gilead, there's that thread.
Mhm.
And I had been working for quite some time, for about 9 or 10 months. I really realized that there was a desire for me to get closer to the data side of the house. And I was looking for maybe, like, there was no BI function at the company. I had invested heavily in my analytics career, and I saw a real opportunity. And so we actually had a community event, like go and help paint houses of like a
Yeah.
center.
Like Habitat for Humanity type thing?
Yeah, it was like actually painting a center for people who were like in transition with their life, like
Oh,
reintegrating after
okay.
like going through
Nice.
something. And so we were actually refurbishing the center as kind of like our community event for the quarter. And so the entire CFO and I think it was like the CRO org went. I was in the CRO org at the time. We had just hired a new CIO, Ashwin Balal, and I thought, if there's ever going to be a BI team, it's going to be in his team. Right. And
Yeah.
so I remember we got to this place somewhere in Palo Alto, and everyone was kind of like siphoning off into their teams. And my team was like, oh, we'll just all be on a team together. We'll all just stay in sales operations. And I said, we spent a lot of time together. I think I'm going to go join a different team. And I looked around and I saw a team that was forming that had the chief financial officer, the chief information officer, and the chief accounting officer. I'm like, I'm gonna go join that team. And so I want to get on the radar of these high profile individuals who I think will be good for them to know who I am. I know who they are. And we're gonna have 3.5 hours to like paint walls together and probably have a lot of conversation. And so there was an intent. There was no BI team though at the time. There wasn't a function. However, we got to talking and I shared a little bit of my background with Ashwin. And, and then we finished the day and I moved on. But what's interesting is every time he saw me, he would come over, sit down, grab lunch with me and be like, Ann, how are you doing? How's your career? What's going on for you? I'm thinking about launching a BI function, but not right now. And probably, I don't know, a few months later, he was like, Ann, do you have some time? I want to chat to you. He's like, we're going to roll out a BI function. I've hired one of my deputies from my formal company to come in and be our VP. I want you to meet with him. I think you should come join our team. And I think about that. I'd done the work. He created this opportunity, but honestly, like I put myself in front of him and was like, this is my background. This is my experience. I'm interested in this. And you have to make sure that you're like in front of that person or on their radar. So when the
Yeah.
opportunity comes up, they naturally think of you, right?
Yes. I mean, if that's the clip that we use to show that's the clip. I talk to people all the time, right? We in our groups that, we're both in, right? And I think I can tell that some people don't understand that, right? They're like, "But
Mhm.
why would I talk to people if they're not hiring?" You're like, "How am I?" It's like, yeah, look, you have to find a way to connect with them, right? Whether it's going to some type of event in your community or doing things that it can't just be so narrow of like, I'm going to apply for a job and ask for an
Mhm.
intro of maybe someone that knows them. Like it has to be more strategic. And we just have to get out of this mindset that networking is asking people to go to coffee. And also that it's about being social, right?
Mhm.
Anything with strategy is hard. It doesn't
Yeah.
mean it's easy. So if it feels weird, like even for someone that has grown up being a big extrovert, but now I do feel more introverted in some cases. Like I still have to push myself, but I'm always glad I did it. I'm never like, man, I hated meeting a couple more people. Like we're just at such a level where trust is so important, right? And those
Mhm.
things are just they're a part of what you have to do. You don't have to be best friends or make more friends. It's literally just meeting more people. And by the way, it will actually make you feel better about humanity. The more folks that you meet.
Yes. The
Like,
more you connect,
yes.
it really and I have to interject here because we were talking a little bit about this in preparation. We talked about like the slimy aspect of networking,
Yeah.
right? And I think we discussed this idea of like, I think I have to put in deposits. Put in deposits, and you don't know if you're ever going to withdraw that. You
Yeah.
might never withdraw it, right? You might just be putting in the deposits, helping people, going to events, making connections, being genuinely interested in people and sharing your story. I have on the other side of this. I mean, people reach out to me often.
Yeah.
Hey, Ann, I saw you did this. Can you introduce me here? Hey, Ann, there's this job. Can you refer me? They've never reached out to me before. They've never said any. And suddenly they're like, hi, this is what I would like. And sometimes, I'm a person, I help a lot of people. I run a free
Yeah.
community. I do Women of Pavilion. And there are some people even where I have helped introduce. And this doesn't happen as much anymore because now I think about it when I help them. But I've like helped them intro, and then I like never hear from them again.
Yeah.
And I feel used.
Yeah.
I'm like, what was that?
Yeah.
Right? That's
Totally.
slimy.
Yeah.
And then I've had other people where I'm like, I don't expect them to like send me a gift or all these things. Although I have introduced people or they have introduced me and I have sent them gifts after I have done that, putting in deposits. And, recently I introduced a couple women for jobs and that I knew were out there that fit their profile, and I knew the hiring manager. And what was so fantastic is, and I stole this from Amy Volas. She said this one. She's like, I'm going to help people and I'm going to introduce. My ask is you let me know what happened, no matter the conclusion, whether you got the job, you didn't. And I think it's so fair. So I started doing that. I said, listen, I'm happy to introduce you. I just want you to let me know how it's going. I want to know whether you got it or not. And people do that. And I had a woman recently that I introduced for a leadership in a RevOps position, in a RevOps role, I should say. And, she got an interview, she was meeting the team. And then she actually very honestly, and I respect her, said, I started to realize I don't think this is the quite opportunity. I have some other opportunities in the mix that I feel better about. It's a lot to juggle all of them. I want to focus in. I wanted to let you know I am going to move on and share this, but I wanted to share it with you.
Yeah.
I was like, yes. And I will recommend that woman again because
Yeah.
she really cared about the experience, not just from her perspective, but also from the company's hiring perspective, but also me introducing her. Right.
Totally. No, I think that is so valid, right? Of just it's also part of like building that trust element too, right? And
Mhm.
showing the respect. Like it has to be both ways, right? So
Mhm.
I totally agree. I actually had the other day, this is interesting, and there's a candidate that I placed 3 years ago, right? That came from my network. Um, and we've actually in the 5 years we've been in business, I don't think we've ever had this happen. If it has, it's been one other time. I can't recall though. This individual, the hiring manager calls me on the day they're supposed to start, right? After we help them, if they did the work, obviously, but like get this job, everything, they'd reached out and done all those things and know them from a previous.
Oh gosh, I know where this is going, but I'm going to wait for it.
He doesn't show up the first day. I have to call and say, hey, like what happened? I got an offer at my current company I couldn't refuse. And I'm like, I get it, but why would you wait till the day that you
Yes.
start with your I was shocked, right? I get an email recently saying, "Hey, I know I put you in a tough position. Um, I'm in a tough position now. I know, but I called to apologize. Would love that." And I'm just thinking the audacity of not having the EQ. Look, I've had people not sign offer letters, not move forward. I've done that before, right? It's all about how you handle it, right? If you have to wait till your start date, one, just incredibly bush
Yeah.
league. And
Selfish.
yeah,
Just
and
selfish.
look, I don't hold like I've moved on from it, but I'm not going to help you again.
No. Like that bridge is burned.
Yeah, and
Sorry.
not because it's a grudge, like, the fact that you think that you called me to apologize is nuts, right? So it's just an example of how those types of things, like, be mindful, right? Like, a great candidate overall, but, like, I don't trust that you have the emotional intelligence to know how to handle this, and
Right.
therefore yeah, it was a tough spot, but it looks worse for you, so all that to say, just, I know that's kind of an extreme example, but
No, but
yeah.
it's real. And it's, what underlies it, what I kept thinking when you said that, it's social capital.
Yes,
Like
yes.
real social
Right.
capital,
It's like
right?
people get so focused on the end result that they're willing to discard all these other things that, by the way, like how many times do we say like life is full circle? Like you run into those things, keep all of those things warm and solid, even if they may or may not be a part of your story, but the chances one of them are in the future is huge, right? So it just moving on from that, like a lot of job seekers are told just to network, right? So going deeper, like what's missing from that advice as we dive deeper here?
Yeah. Some people don't know this about me. It's on my profile on LinkedIn. But I got my MBA and I did my MBA in Africa in Cape Town. And it's a little bit of a different MBA program where it was when I did it in 2013, where you have to write a thesis, a master's thesis. Very hard, long slog, 400 hours of work. I'm glad it's done. I'm never doing it again. And
Fair.
writing thesis, I've always been kind of really captivated by this topic of engagement, right? I tend to be a very engaged individual in things that I do, right? I don't do anything half-ass. Yes, I just said ass on this podcast, but you know
That's
what I mean.
we're all
And
adults here.
we can do it. And so I decided, and I bring this up because I was so inspired to understand more about engagement. I'm like, I'm going to write my thesis on engagement and what drives engagement. So, read all these theory articles, interviewed a bunch of people, ran cohort studies, and I kept coming up with this root of connectedness. That was the word, not just connection, but connectedness. We study weak ties, strong ties, theory around connection. And then I was like, okay, let's follow that trail. What is it about connectedness? How do you create that? If that is the thing, creating this level of connectedness, which I think also applies to what's missing or could be missing in, how you network effectively. You're looking to build deep connectedness. So I was like, well, I want to understand how you do that. So I was like, what are the tenets of that? So I interviewed all these people who were identified by their communities internationally as connectors, right? And what was fascinating is they all, and the research supported this, they all had the same 5 characteristics. And this came out in different language, how they were described, the impacts that they had. And I'm going to go from memory. The 5 were authenticity, number 1. I know it's a word that's thrown around a lot, but it comes back like, are you being authentic? Are you showing up as your
Yeah.
authentic self? People can tell. Are
Yep.
you being really performative? Are you pretending to be something that you're not? I imagine in job interviews, you're a recruiter, you run a recruiting firm. Like, is this the real deal? Right? Like, am I getting the real thing? Authenticity. The second was I described as openness, which also came through as fluidity. So you have a level of openness, this kind of this aspect of, giving deposits, putting in the time and creating people, giving space for people to come to you and for you to come to them. So there was no like rigidity and close off. That was really, really key. The third one was provocation or disruption, people who say the hard thing. And I think this is important because when I think about this in terms of both jobs that I have applied for and been in interview cycles for, or where I have interviewed people, I am looking for them to have a perspective. I am looking to know, like, what do they individually think? I'm not hiring them for, can they say the right
Yes.
thing? What do they think specifically? And, does that line up with what we're looking for? But I want them to have a point of view. And people who have a point of view that at times is disruptive drive a lot more connectedness. The last 2 are very closely related, specificity and relevance. And I describe this in that people are like trying to figure out, like, am I going to connect with this person? Do I feel a connection with them? And so if you're talking really vaguely up here, they can't get into it. So you have to get
Yep.
really specific about what you care about or what you're about. And when I go to networking events, it's like, don't just say, I work in B2B SaaS. I'm a fractional RevOps executive. What does that mean? What's the impact that you've driven? Get specific, and people will be able to discern, is this something that's relevant to me? And then they only connect. Maybe they're like, wow, that's really impressive. But they're like, if it's not relevant to me, I don't really care.
Yep.
And so I think about that. It's a broad theory around how do you drive connection, therefore driving engagement. When you network, you're looking to have engagement with people. And so I think you have to have at least one of those tenets
Yep.
represented.
Totally. I couldn't agree more. If if we go and move to talking about hiring for a second,
Mhm.
when you're hiring, how much does your network come into play, and when do you bring a recruiter in?
Yes. Gosh, let's think about this. I mean, recently, I'm thinking about the hires that I've made of late. Really rely heavily on my network and also for jobs that I am advising. So for
For
example,
sure.
um, I was helping to hire recently a VP level position. I knew what the position was because I'd done it before. It was in the RevOps space. I'm quite connected in that. And so before we even started the hiring cycle, I was like, here are 5 people based on type of company, stage of company, what you're looking for, level of that I think you need to talk to. Right. The
Yeah.
person who got hired also was referred in by an internal person. So network really mattered. Right.
Yeah.
People that I have referred in, I just recently referred someone, she might listen to this. You probably know her, Ashley Stamps LaFont.
Yes, love her.
So I know she's amazing.
The best. But I know.
Yeah, and actually 2 other women in my network, 2 who all got interviews and quite far in the interview cycle. Ashley was the one who ended up getting it, which is fantastic. They were all wonderful, high caliber candidates, but I referred them in to a company that I advise, QuotaPath.
Yeah.
And, they reached out to me before they even posted the job. They're like, "Hey, we're gonna post this next week. We know you know a lot of people in this space. Who should we be meeting with?" So those are company, and this happens all the time.
Yeah.
I had another SVP of operations reach out to me before he posted a job, and he's like, "These are the 2 roles. Who should I be looking at? Can you share it with your community?" I said, "Sure." Did I get paid to do that? No. Did I get a finder's fee? No.
Yeah.
So I think network plays a role both in how I have hired,
Yeah.
how I have helped others hire, one experience from how I personally got a job, and I think this is important. The last company I was at, Maven Clinic, I had come off a sabbatical, took a few months off, just like 20 years nonstop work. I was like, I need a break.
Yeah.
And I was like, really use that time to think very thoughtfully about what's the next step I want to take. So I realized I wanted to work in a very mission driven organization. I wanted to really take advantage of the skills that I brought from like a go to market strategy and operations perspective. And Maven Clinic came onto my radar, and I happened to see they are hiring for a senior director of ops. Instead of applying, I was like, I wonder who the chief people officer is. I looked that person up. I looked at their profile. They looked at my profile the next day. They inbounded to me and said, hey, because I knew I like read it. I'm like, oh, this role was written for me.
Yeah.
But I wanted to check and I wanted to look around. And before I even had a chance to reach out to him, he reached out to me and was like, I want to connect you with the hiring manager. I got the job and I leveled it up to a VP. But that was all about like not going the traditional route. Like, who's the hiring manager? How do I create a personal connection with this person and get on
Right.
their radar to short circuit? Right.
Yep. No, I love that. I mean, you have to do the work, but again, that just goes back to the strategy of it, right? And sometimes it can be that type of setup of like looking and doing your research, and that will happen. Like if you do all of these things enough at the end of the day, they will result in success, right? But you have to be consistent and you have to be thoughtful and again, strategic, which is like the word of this podcast, right? Outside of networking. So just kind of in closing here, right? A couple more things. What's one mistake you see people make? And we talked about this a little bit, but when reaching out for intros, and how can they fix it?
Yeah. I mean, it's the aspect of the people who are like, I don't know you, got 15 minutes to give me time and like give me some advice. I've never met you before. Have a perspective, know what I do.
Yeah.
Maybe have engaged. Maybe like come to my community. I run a free community. You want to come and ask a question? Every month I have that. We have opportunities for people to ask Q&A. Come to that. Like
Yeah.
put forth some effort. And that's the other thing. I again, highly engaged person, hard worker, have always been that way. And when people come to me and expect me to do all the work to help them, it's lazy.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh, come on.
Yep.
Like like I've gotten to where I've gotten today because I'm not afraid to do the hard work. So
Yep.
show that you've done some work.
Yep.
Go and do some work and then come to me. Tell me what you've done. Make it really easy to help you as
Yep.
well. Right?
I'm going to say this again, and it might really bother some people, but asking people to go to coffee, if that is your network approach, it is lazy and it is ineffective. And maybe those are strong words. I'm not saying you shouldn't ever bring people to coffee, but you all, if you're reaching out to people for help, those people are probably super busy. And that
Yeah.
shows that you've not taken any time to understand them, right? And again, I know the intent is not bad, right? As you do, but it's still, it's not to be sensitive. It's just a little bit offensive. It's like, do you think I have time to go
Right.
drive somewhere, even if it's 10 minutes away, to sit down for 30 minutes and not really know, like, if you understand what I do and also like what the value is of meeting, right? Outside of just
Yeah.
helping, which is okay. And then because you may or may not buy me a $5 cup of coffee, like, so it's just one of those things that is not bravery. That's not networking. That's not strategic. That is very old school. And that, by the way, that used to be a way that people did things back then, like, 20 years ago. I'm not saying those things haven't ever worked before, but where we are today and how we're busier and a lot of things are digital and the access we have to learn about people, because that's how we had to learn
Yeah.
about people. That we didn't have social media. We had Google, but it wasn't as strong. It's very different now. So you had to meet in person. We're not there anymore. And I'm not saying you can't ever meet in person, but that can't be your go-to, because to me, that's already a big red flag of like, you don't understand what I do in my role and you're not taking the time to value that. Right. So yeah.
Absolutely. And by the way, I realized I didn't answer one of your questions earlier, and I want to make sure I answer it.
Go for it.
Because you asked me, what role has a recruiter played in either how you've hired, maybe
Oh,
been hired? And I want to share that because I think it's important. When I moved back so I was in Africa before I moved back to the United States
yep.
and joined a SaaS company. And so I'd been out of like market for like 5 years.
Yep.
I'd never worked in SaaS. I had a market, but it was all like biotech. And so luckily, my sister, she is actually an executive recruiter, fun fact.
Nice.
And I was like, I'm moving back. I'm applying to these jobs. I'm not sure which one. And bless her, she's like, I'm going to connect you with a woman who worked at her firm, who's like, she works in Silicon Valley. She works specifically with tech startups. And I've asked if she wouldn't mind sitting down with you to like You can ask her questions. You can understand what the market rate is. I mean, that is an amazing amount of pressure that I had access to someone like that. But I also had to show up really prepared, right? I know, like, these are the companies I'm looking at. This is my experience. This is why.
Yep.
And she really helped me level set to know like what is benchmark. So that's one way I've used it as an applicant, right? I've also partnered with recruiters to help me get jobs for the first time I moved to San Francisco many, many years ago, like
Yep.
20 years ago. And then how I have partnered with recruiters is on like very specialist hiring. For example, when I was at a company, we were hiring for sales directors and VPs of sales, and we had a really specific market. And we needed somebody who understood that market and who had a strong network with experienced sales professionals that could get them to us quickly because we had to hire and we had to ramp and we had to get going.
Yep.
So like that is where when we are like dealing with something very specialist that like I maybe don't have access or understanding of or a network, I'm going to call in a recruiter, a strong
Yep.
recruiter like you and your firm to help me.
Yep. No, I think that's a great point. In highlighting that of where it makes sense to bring someone in, and then when it doesn't, right? What you can start with.
Mhm.
So, final thought here: one intro that changed your career, and why it matters.
Ooh, one intro. I've been really lucky. I've had some fantastic mentors and sponsors and people who have really looked out for me and kind of like I've been like on their mind. I think the one that I want to speak to is Yusuf Khan. So Yusuf, I actually met through Ashwin Bilal, that's CIO at Medallia, who has also been an incredible sponsor. Um, I was running the BI function and kind of like also RevOps before it was RevOps and systems integration. And we were building a product, a Medallia product for CIOs. And I was working with the CIO, who's a very commercially minded CIO, Ashwin, to take it to market. And he said, we want to test this with some CIOs. He's like, so I'm going to bring in some CIO friends that I have, and they're going to give us raw feedback on this. I'm like, okay, great. And he's like, and you're going to pitch. And I was like, okay, sure. And so Yusuf was one of these people that he brought in. And, I did the pitch. I was basically like the solution consultant and the AE and
Right.
like prepping the product. And so we did the pitch to him. And then he left. He was a wonderful guy. And I got a message from him soon after that on LinkedIn that was like, basically like, I really enjoyed meeting you. I would love to stay in touch with you and I would love to mentor you in your career. I was really impressed by you, which I was like, wow, amazing. Thank you. And so I was like, okay, yes, let's take, I didn't know where that would go,
Yep.
but I knew this person to take it. So we stayed in contact once in a while, message each other on LinkedIn. And when I moved back, we from Africa to be or not from Africa, when I decided to move on from Medallia, I reached out to him also for some advice because we'd put some deposits in and started having like monthly or quarterly catch-ups. And he has introduced me to a number of companies that he's been an advisor for or a board member. Like, you should come hire Ann. That's happened a few times. He has actually brought me on to Ridge Ventures as a venture advisor. I have helped him before I was a venture advisor, just like, Ann, come tell us what you think about this product. He's introduced me to companies that I now advise. And he is one of those people. Talk about somebody who just is always putting in deposits and expects nothing back. That is Yusuf. But if Yusuf calls me and says, Ann, I need your help, I am there right away
Yeah.
because he has helped me so much. And he's also helped be like a sounding board for when I've had to make some pretty like crucial transitions in my career. Somebody who I have just such deep trust and respect for. So
Yeah.
that's probably the person I would say.
Oh, that's such a great, example and one to end it on, right? And it just takes one connection like that to change
Mhm.
everything, right? And again, it's not like being over social. We've gotta, like, get out of that mindset, and really look how to capitalize on this in a way that's efficient, right? But it does make a difference. It will actually help you feel better even if you don't wanna do it, but all it
It
takes.
really will. It really will.
Yeah, it will help so much, but I know that's all the time we've got for today, and thank you so much for being with us. This has been a
Of course.
great conversation. I hope everyone is taking notes or at least mentally taking notes. Listen to this because you have, dropped some absolute, like, nuggets here that are gonna be powerful and important. They might seem simple. They're deceivingly easy is what I say, but For the Talent GTM podcast, right, you can always discover our hiring insights with other leaders like Ann. And if today's conversation really piques your interest, make sure to subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or our website and never miss another episode. Until next time, we'll see you later.